Hey guys, here we are, chapter 21, section 6. We're going to wrap up the chapter today. We want to talk about a low waste economy. This is the goal, to minimize waste, true waste that we have nothing to do with, to get it down to a small amount as possible. Now the requirements for doing this, for shifting, because we're not a low waste economy right now. Not the United States, not many countries in the world. Some are doing much better than others, it's just kind of how things go. But in order to do it, we have got to reduce our resource use. We just need to use less. We need to reuse and recycle most of our solid and even hazardous waste. Once again, hazardous waste to somebody is a product another company might need. So it's when, recycle, reuse it. Let's get it from here to here, use up as much as possible. This has got to happen at the local, you and me, our neighborhood doing it. It's got to happen at national levels, governments getting involved, and it's got to happen at global levels. And in a lot of cases we are. There are treaties out, there are things that we are doing to move in this direction. Now, citizen action, you and me, right? Citizens of whatever country we might be in. Many citizens have already acted to oppose the construction of incinerators, landfills, treatment plants, chemical plants. It's the idea of not in my backyard. These things want to come in, want to put a landfill here. No, not in my backyard. Citizens have risen up and said, no, not here. We're not going to approve it. We don't want to, we stand up against it. We have the right for any company coming in, they have to put up what their proposal is. Citizens have a right to have a say. And a lot of times, citizens are taking that right, they're having a stand, and we're not going to put it in our backyard. Now, people want to say, well, something has to be done with it. It's going to be in somebody's backyard. Does it? It may not have to be in anybody's backyard. We may not need the incinerator. We may not need, can we reuse, recycle, and go from a cradle to cradle instead of a cradle to grave approach. The mindset has got to switch, and this is what we're after. We want to minimize it as much as possible, and it takes citizen action because that's the argument, we got to do something with it. The counter argument, focus on producing less. Don't have a end source in mind. Just building an incinerator, putting up another landfill, another place to go for it, is encouraging the waste. We have to do everything we can to discourage it. Now, on a global level, there are international treaties that have done that. In 1992, the Basel Convention met. This is nations, governments coming together, and they were bans participating countries from shipping hazardous waste to other countries. A lot of times, honestly, in the US, that's what we did. We just shipped it to somebody else, not in our backyard, but we're going to send it to your yard. And other countries that didn't have as much money were willing to take it because we were paying for it. We'll pay you to take this, and they did. Well, the Basel Convention banned this from happening. And a lot of times this was e-waste. Well, the United States, we signed it, but we haven't ratified it. In other words, it takes legislation to ratify that we really won't do it. We've signed it, but we didn't ratify it. So we're not held by the standards of the rules or the laws. We are really just an observer. We come to the conventions, we meet, and we see what everybody else is saying. And yes, we agree with it in principle, but it hasn't been ratified, so we're not held accountable. Many governments have signed in, we're on the fence. In 2000, the Stockholm Convention, once again, governments came together to put a ban on persistent organic pollutants like DDT. These organic chemicals that we make, and they're persistent, they don't break down. Since they don't break down, then we can get biomagnification or bioaccumulation. Biomagnification in a food chain, bioaccumulation in an organism or an individual. So they banned these. But once again, the United States, signed it, we didn't ratify it. On the fence again. We want to ban these chemicals because we know one country produces it, will exist, it gets in the water supply, it is persistent, it sticks around for decades, and it causes a problem somewhere else. Grasshopper effect, right? You create it here, but you have little control of where it goes. 2020, Sweden is put in a ban of hazardous chemicals, and it became effective last year. In Sweden, this now places the burden on industries to show that chemicals are safe. It's kind of like chemicals are guilty until proven innocent. This is a complete opposite of how most of the world is doing it. You know, you produce a chemical and you say, oh, it's probably okay unless we prove it harmful, like DDT. Oh, DDT is fine. Later we find out it's a cancer-causing agent. Many chemicals have been produced, and then later we found out, okay, they're a mutagen, they're a tetragen, they're a carcinogen. Well, Sweden has put a ban on the hazardous chemicals, and it is now the companies that are going to make or produce it, the burden is on them to show that it's safe. These are some of the ways that nations are getting involved, and it's a movement that is picking up speed. We have got to encourage reuse and recycling. Use something over and over and over. You buy a yogurt container, we'll use it to keep food in, use it to keep something in your garage in, nails, tools, reuse things over and over. But we don't want to use it using it once and throwing it away. We've got to get out of that mindset. Now, factors that just hinder this. Why aren't people reusing? Why aren't they recycling? Well, our market prices don't include some of the harmful costs. We buy plastics and they're cheap, but we're not looking at when we have to go clean these things up. Literally the millions and billions of dollars a year spent in picking up this trash or dealing with it after the fact. It needs to be built in. If it's there or there's a price on it having to come back to the manufacturer, we're much more likely to do it than if we just buy it and it's cheap and I throw it away. It needs to not be so cheap. We need to put full cost pricing in. The economic playing field is uneven. It's just the way it is. In certain areas, it's easy to throw it away. In other areas, it's not. Also, the demand for recycled goods fluctuates. You know, it's up or it's down. We need to make sure we have systems in place that buying something recycled is desirable. So, yeah, that's a recyclable. I'll buy that over this. I want to buy something recycled over virgin materials, you know, it's first time use. Now, governments can increase subsidies for reusing recycled materials. And once again, we can put things out there to try and help and encourage the purchase of recyclable goods. And also, we can require the government to purchase recycled materials, right? The government has to buy a lot of stuff. Schools are government property, courthouses, you know, all kinds of things fall under the government. And the government should, when we're purchasing things, put a high regard for buying recycles. We should buy recycles if at all possible, and only if they're not available do we buy virgin materials. Also, this fee per bag waste collection system. Fort Worth, Texas, they only recycled about 33% of their material till they went to the fee per bag. In other words, you know, a smaller trash bag costs less, you know, what you carry out to the cart. Small one may cost you $20 a month and the big one may cost you $40 a month. You have to pay for what goes in the bin, but you don't have to pay for what goes in the recycling. And the recycling went from 33% to 85%. The county went from losing money to making money on recyclables because it's volume. You don't have enough on it, you don't make money. But we need to largely increase fee per bag waste collection system around the world, if at all possible, but definitely in America. We do this in Gainesville and Fort Worth. Many counties do, but not everyone is on board. We need to encourage this reuse and recycling by yard sales. Visit a yard sale, secondhand store. Oh my goodness, in Gainesville, Florida, I mean, we have your local Goodwills and etc. But then there's Plato's Closet. Now it's a little different. Goodwill is truly secondhand, and it takes a long time to find something, but we still get a lot of various things from there. But then Plato's Closet is kind of an upscale recycle place. People bring in clothes that they're not wearing, but they're still really nice. And we shop there a lot of times for a lot of our clothes. We get really nice deal. Second hand, but still really good quality. Frequent these as much as possible instead of, let's encourage places that are, selling it again, reusing it when it's still a really good product. I may not like it anymore, or maybe I grew out of it, but it's still a really good something to wear. Yard sales, secondhand store, eBay, Craigslist, things of this nature, getting goods that somebody else now doesn't want, just for whatever reason. The free cycle network, like on the web, there's a free cycle. Like I have something and I'm ready to get rid of it. We can go to the free cycle and find other people that are looking for it. So you can go into free cycle and say, hey, I'm really looking for used bowling balls. And somebody else says, yeah, I've got old ones and I want to get rid of them. And they're just trying to connect people wanting to get rid of something with somebody looking to get it. Personally, I'm not a fan of doing yard sales at my house, but I'm very happy with giving something I don't want anymore to someone else who needs it or wants it. This is a good way to go. Upcycling, taking materials and turning it into something of higher value. Sometimes like those little, I call them Publix bags, these little single-use shopping bags. These things get converted into things like planks that we can use for decking. I've seen them used in like Adirondack outdoor chairs, but it's made of this plastic material. It's very solid, doesn't rot, sticks around. There's a lot of upscale cycling we can do. Take something that's of not as much value, turn it into something of more value. Once again, you and I have to actually go out there and buy these items. When that's a recycled material. I want that over this. We've got to show there's a market for it. Also, this idea of low waste economies. Certain communities, certain countries, certain towns really focus on having a low waste economy. We are focused around trying to minimize the amount of our waste. Even in some places, they refer to it as a zero waste movement. Some restaurants, corporations, and others have really dramatically lowered their waste output just by saying, hey, we're going to have a policy of zero waste. What can we do to do that? The employees get involved, come up with ideas, they implement these, and they truly work to minimize waste. Sometimes it's just a thought. We need to minimize waste. If you tried to minimize waste, you could. We just don't think about it sometimes. Some of the key processes or the key principles, if you will, for a low waste economy, well, everything's connected. When we realize everything is connected, like the food waste, we shouldn't throw it in the trash. It should go in a compost, right? Because it's all connected. This is nutrients for my garden. There is no way. Not in my backyard, right? Well, it's somebody's backyard somewhere. We've got to have this idea there is no way. It's still here on the planet, and we need to treat it like that. We need to respect the planet we live in. Producers and polluters should pay. This is one of the key principles. The person creating it needs to pay for it. It needs to be part of that cost. The people who making it or the people who are polluting, like with the Superfund sites. I'm in favor of a tax for the companies that produce hazardous materials. That tax goes to help clean up places where we have hazardous material leaks because it's inevitable. But producers and polluters should pay for it. And the last principle there is really we can mimic nature. The more we look around at nature and we try and set up our industry and the way that we run our lives more like nature by reusing, recycling, composting, and exchanging. In nature, nothing really goes to waste. It all gets cycled round and round and round. Some things take longer to cycle out, like maybe bones, but eventually everything goes back into the system. We need to take this approach as well. Now, there's a case study here about industrial ecosystems. These are industry sites that are really doing biomimicry. This goes all the way back to the very first case study. Biomimicry, when we look at nature and we try to mimic it as much as possible. What happens is a lot of these companies will set up a resource exchange web. So you may have a power company that's creating, power they're burning, and they use this cogeneration. They're using some of their waste heat to go to homes or some greenhouses, other things around. And you'll have another company in this same complex area, and they may be doing something that produces high levels of sulfur, and they give their sulfur to a company which is making sulfuric acid for sales in labs around the country. But these industrial parks are trying to find ways that, hey, you're doing that, I'm doing this. So the owners and the companies to get together ahead of time and say, all right, who's going to use what and what do we need here? It's, okay, we need this kind of factory, we need this kind of factory, we need this kind of output. And that way we can all share the resources and you're all really close together, cuts down on waste, raises profits, and it's more healthy for the communities. We have to observe how the natural systems respond and then apply that to our industrial systems. The picture back here is one such park. Now, in the center, we have the electric power plant, and it has some waste heat that can go out to like a pharmaceutical plant to help warm it or use it for there. A wallboard factory using creation, it goes out to fish farming, etc., to help keep them warm enough. Then the oil refinery winds up they're pulling out sulfates, right, from out of their refinery and the walls, precipitators, and they're sending that to the sulfuric acid producer, or they're sending some of their natural gas or the sulfates out to the washboard factory, using it for raw materials. So some of these things are coming up with waste products, which is actually raw materials for someone else, but they're purposely putting themselves all together in one industrial park to take advantage of this. If you're close to the power plant, then they can send out all of that free hot water waste energy that can be used for heating and other possible purposes. Case study. This takes us to our big ideas for this chapter. So what are the order of priorities for dealing with hazardous waste? It's out there, but what do? Number one, minimize the production of it. Reuse it or recycle it whenever possible. And there's a lot of opportunities for that. If we can't reuse it or recycle it, convert it into less hazardous materials, like in the ways we talked about, bioremediation, etc. And then when it's all said and done, the very small amount that we have left, there's nothing else we can do about it, safely store what's left, whether it's an injection well or something else, but not just leaving it out in the open. We need to view solid waste as wasted resources. All that stuff is something that could have been used for something else. And when we make that mental switch and realize, hey, that's a useful product, we could use that for this, we could turn it into this. This is a company's cradle to cradle again. We get a better idea of how to minimize the amount that's after. We've got to see these things as materials that we want to avoid producing in the first place, but when they are produced, we need to find out other ways to utilize them and keep the cycle running round and round and round. We've got to have a cradle to cradle approach, and a lot of times this almost needs to start with businesses. We can have grassroots movements kind of demanding it, but businesses have got to start retooling what they do. We can demand you have to take the product back. And if the companies know they have to take the product back when its lifespan is out, like now my TV's done and I have to take it back to them, they have to take it back. They're going to find ways to reuse it because they don't want to pay for the trash either. They're going to get the materials. We want to convert the harmful environmental impacts of human activities into beneficial, like that eco park. It could be harmful, but we can turn that around and make it beneficial. And our challenge that's left to us all is to transition to a low waste economy as soon as possible. We've always had a throwaway society in the United States. We've got to rethink that and have a reusing society in the United States. Guys, that's it for chapter 21. Take care, and we'll see you next time.